call. Moving to thing 5 of this week's version of the 5 things. Gold and Bitcoin around all-time highs. I know we talked about this a little bit ago. I saw some questions online. I'm sure that's where this thing is coming from. What does that mean, Gary?
Yeah, so that is where it's coming from. And I got some criticism last week from someone on Twitter or X, and I thought they made a good point. Last week we were talking about gold and Bitcoin. They were at all-time highs. Bitcoin has had a horrible retracement. It's gone from, 73,000 to 67,000, which, 3 weeks ago, every Bitcoin holder would have been thrilled to be at 67,000, right? These mini pullbacks, at this point just make me laugh. We put up a segment from the show saying, hey, Bitcoin and gold at all-time highs. And, what does it mean? And somebody pointed out, hey, you didn't really tell us what it means. You didn't really give us the analysis. You just pointed out that it happened. And you know what? Mea culpa. I think that was fair criticism. It was reasonable. We pointed it out, but we didn't really explain to people what it meant. And so, we're taking the criticism to heart and coming back, and let's give people, I think, a good explanation of what we think is happening and why these two things are happening at the same time.
Gary, with the court, for me, it was right, almost like you see them in a way kind of inverse, right? But at the same time, they're both moving the different direction. For you, is it a preference between Bitcoin and gold? Is it, I know within the DKI portfolio, it's, hey, we have both, right? Can you dive even more into detail of why this is happening or what you think is causing this?
Yeah, so let's take those in order. First of all, I own both. Because we have so much money printing and so much overspending, I'm concerned about the purchasing power of the dollar going forward. One of the things that we talk about a lot, right? I don't know the price of Bitcoin a year from now or 5 years from now, but I do know the purchasing power of whatever dollars you have in your bank account are going to be down. So I like owning both. Now, if people want to know my preference, I have an enormous position in Bitcoin because it's gone up so much. It is the largest position I own. It is outsized in my portfolio. Gold, I have a decent sized position, but of the two, I prefer Bitcoin. But let's talk about the meaning of these on an individual basis, right? Let's take gold first. Gold is considered one of the best risk-off assets. So risk-off means, hey, when money's coming out of the market, when you're worried about the stock market, when you're worried about your local fiat currency, just a fancy way of saying whatever government currency. So the dollar is a fiat currency, the yen is, the euro, the British pound, right? The Peruvian sol. These are all fiat currencies, a government currency. When people are worried about their fiat currency, when they're worried about geopolitics, we have multiple wars going on and Taiwan's being threatened. We have shipping lanes that are being closed. These are the kinds of things that maybe will say, oh no, there's a ton of risk. Gold has been, a reliable money alternative or unit of money for thousands of years. And so people turn to gold during those times. And I don't think it's a coincidence that at a time when we have massive geopolitical uncertainty, when every government in the world is debasing their fiat currency and making it worth less, that people are saying, you know what? Gold for thousands of years has been a good place to store value. And so that is the risk off response. And I think it's a good one. And it's been a valid response. And that's the thing I think that's driving gold to all-time highs. Now, what we're seeing in Bitcoin is almost exactly the opposite, right? Bitcoin has been recently a proxy for global liquidity. Yeah. And so as you have markets, stock markets, like, in the US hitting all-time highs, and as you have governments throwing liquidity into the system, that makes its way into speculative assets and into assets like Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is traded with global liquidity and has at times been a high beta proxy for the S&P 500 or for the NASDAQ, right? And a high beta proxy simply means it trades pretty much in line with the market, but much greater amplitude. So if the market's up a little bit, Bitcoin will be up a lot. If the market's down a little bit, Bitcoin will be down a lot. And so what we're seeing is Bitcoin has kind of been the ultimate risk on asset, right? When asset prices are high, money flows into Bitcoin. Now, the one thing that I've said that I don't think is going to apply long term is I think long term Bitcoin is the best play possible against fiat debasement as governments all over the world engage in massive amounts of debt spending and reduce the spending power of the pound sterling, of the euro, of the yen, and unfortunately of the dollar. That is going to drive people to Bitcoin, which as of next month will become the hardest money in the world because we're hitting the halving next month. The Bitcoin stock to flow ratio is going to become even better than gold. And so my view on this, and the reason I'm so large in Bitcoin, isn't so much that I care whether we're risk on or risk off this day, this week, this month. I'm not focused on the short term. I think long term, governments are going to spend their fiat currencies into meaningless nothingness, total loss of value. That's the direction we're heading on this. And Bitcoin, which is a great deflationary asset, where the amount of additional Bitcoin that's issued is actually cut in half every 4 years or so. That's actually where I want to have my money. So long term, my thesis on Bitcoin and gold are the same. But to answer our valid critic from Twitter from last week, what it's telling me is that you got money flowing into risk on and money flowing into risk off. The reasons are a little bit different, but I think they're going to converge over the coming years. Hopefully this will be considered a detailed, appropriate response.
If not, we'll circle back again next week, I'm sure.
Yeah.